Now that you've completed your slides and turned them in, we're going to move on to section 3 of Unit 2. Now, just a reminder, all the pertinent information that you need, including this video, will be on the topics page of My Hilltop. So reference that and you will find everything you need in terms of handouts or any data or anything like that, as I say, including this instructional video. In this section, you are actually going to design a survey. Okay, you've collected data from the ACS, but now you're going to design your own survey and collect your own data so that you can compare your data with the ACS data. So you're going to have a subset of the ACS variables. You'll collect data from family and friends. The questions that will collect the same info as ACS questions did. Okay, so you'll be able to compare them. And you'll be able to compare local community data to previous state level data. So that's basically the objective of your survey. You're going to have a subset of some community that you're going to take and survey and compare that with the entire state data that you acquired from the ACS. And you're going to check whether this local data changes or enhances any of your previous thinking. So you've collected the state data. Now you're going to take and focus in on a smaller community, a smaller subset, and compare the results of that data with your previous data. If you remember the data science process, you've seen this slide several times before. Well, basically what you're going to be doing in this section where you design your own survey is you're going to be gathering and organizing data. You're going to begin on that second block, okay, where you gather your own data, all right? So what questions are you going to include? So let me just indicate in the top paragraph here, you're now going to collect your own survey. You will choose from the list of questions below and on the next slide, and we will be able to compare your own local community with a state of your choice. In other words, it's going to be the state of Massachusetts, obviously. Not everybody will be comfortable disclosing certain details about themselves, such as their income. So you may choose to not ask or simply leave the field blank if they're uncomfortable. I think probably the best thing is not to even ask those types of questions if you feel that they're going to make the person uncomfortable. Make sure to name your headers exactly as listed in red so that we will be able to directly compare them with ACS data. So you can see on this page, as well as on the next page, the headings in red. Please use those exact same headings so you can compare the data. And here are some additional questions. So obviously you're not going to ask all these questions, but pick questions that everyone in the class, so everyone in the class is going to have the same list of questions to take and use to create their own survey. So you obviously want to include questions that are going to relate to each individual group's focus, okay? Each individual group has focused one person and one household, so make sure you ask questions that'll take and satisfy or provide data for both groups, okay? So there's going to be one common set of questions. So both of your groups should work together to come up with a common list of questions to include in the survey, and then every single person is going to use that same list of questions. Now, here are some of the considerations you should make concerning your local survey. Obviously, you want to see what questions do we need to include so we can make comparisons to our state level data. And as I said, that has to be questions for both groups. Are there any questions we don't feel comfortable asking of our community? Probably the ones relating to income would be ones that we want to eliminate. Are there questions people won't want to answer? Do you remove these? Why or why not? And how else could you deal with that issue? I think it's best probably just to not even ask those questions, because you want as much data to come back as possible, and you don't want people, one, to feel uncomfortable, or two, to leave it blank. And what additional questions we want to ask our community to give information about the state level need our group has identified. Now, your survey is going to be on a Google form. So we want to make this more comfortable for people to respond to by making it anonymous, for example. How can we structure it so that more people are likely to complete the survey? Obviously, we don't want this to be a terribly long survey. We want people to be anxious and willing to take and complete the entire survey. And do we let people choose not to respond, or do they force responses on each? I don't think we can force people to respond, but if we design it properly and with not too many questions, but with questions that they're comfortable answering, they should respond to all of them. And if you allow people not to respond, you will end up with blanks in your data. However, blanks are not included in the calculations in both Google Sheets and the Colab program. So that's important to remember. So what's the format going to be for this survey? Again, I direct you to the topics page on my Hilltop. There you'll take and notice there is a Google Forms tutorial video. I urge you to take and watch that video if you're not already familiar with Google Forms. And there are also some Google Forms survey templates that you may want to modify and include to take and help you to make your final survey. Now, when you review your Google form, you want to make sure that all the questions have numerical responses, okay? We basically want all the questions to respond with a number. How can we make this more comfortable for people to respond to? For example, making it anonymous. I strongly urge you to do that. Or making some questions optional. Obviously, if they don't want to answer, they can leave it blank. But I'd like to have you design the questions so that most people would be willing and want to take and answer them. And how might these decisions affect the quality of the data we will collect? Obviously, we want the data to be of high quality, and we don't want it to be skewed by any things that we take and put on them, like any restrictions or anything to take and make the data less accurate. How many questions do we want to include? How many are too many? How many do we have to include so all groups, in other words, for our class, it's going to be both groups, can make their local and state comparisons, okay? So you're going to have to have enough questions so that both groups can get the data they need. But obviously, we don't want too many questions because people just aren't going to take the time to answer the survey if there's too many questions. And then again, this is repeating, but how can we structure it so that more people are likely to complete the survey? Do we let people choose not to respond? I think we've already discussed that. All right, once you've come up with your survey, you've got your list of questions, you've designed your survey, now how are we going to implement it? Who does it make sense to collect data from? Should we collect data from adults? Should we collect data from students? Should we collect data one per household? More than one per household? You have to take and discuss that amongst yourselves and make a decision as to how you're going to implement this survey. Obviously, if you just ask students, you might get a different result than if you asked adults and students. Or similarly, if you just asked adults, you might not get this, the same results as you would for students. So you have to make a decision as to what the set of people are you going to use for this survey to make it the most accurate. And how many people should each student ask to complete the survey? Is it okay to collect more data? Okay, obviously, the more data we collect, the better. So you're going to want, you don't want to take and conduct the survey with just, say, 5 people. You're probably going to want to take and get as large a number of people on the survey as possible. And why might we only give the survey to people in our local community rather than spreading the survey more broadly? Okay, again, that's a decision that you're going to have to make as to how broadly you take and make the survey. I mean, we've got situations where we have boarding students who might only have access to other students and adult faculty that are on campus, or we may have people who commute from one community while others commute from another community. So you're going to have to make a decision as to how you're going to take and conduct the survey and how you're going to take and approach the different people. Okay, as I said, this video, as well as all the data you need, is on the topics page. And what I ask you to do now is to take and work as a whole class on this, of coming up with the survey. You're not just going to work in your individual groups. You're going to work as an entire class, okay? Because we want one set of survey questions that each student can use to take and get the data they need for their particular group, okay? So go ahead and spend the rest of the class period on working on that. You may or may not have enough time to take and complete this, but get as much of it done as possible, okay? And I'll see you and we'll discuss where we stand at our next class.